Would members in the back of the chamber please cease conversation? Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, there are times to this floor and engage in heated debate, and we've heard some heated debate on this bill. But my final amendment offers us the opportunity to come together and do something extraordinarily important, and that is to protect our children and grandchildren from mercury and other toxic air pollutants. I want to be clear. The passage of this amendment will not prevent the passage of the underlying bill. If it's adopted, my amendment will be incorporated into the bill, and the bill will be immediately voted upon. Now, I make no apologies for opposing the bill, but regardless of how one feels about this bill, or even EPA's...
House will be in order. Members in the back of the chamber, please take conversations off the floor. Members on the majority side, in the back of the chamber. Gentlelady is recognized.
But regardless of how one feels about this bill or even EPA cement standards, my amendment would be something that we should all agree upon. And that's because it only does two simple things. First, it says we should have safer air standards on giant cement plants if they're located near schools or hospitals with a maternity ward or a neonatal unit. And that's because these large factories are the third largest source of mercury pollution in the United States. We all know that mercury is extremely dangerous to young children, to nursing mothers, to women of childbearing age. Mercury exposure affects a developing child's ability to walk, to talk, to read, to write, to learn. That's why I think none of us should want to see this in our districts. It's a giant cement plant in Midlothian, Texas. It's spewing mercury and other pollutants into the air right next to J.A. Vitovsky Elementary School. I want to just pick on Texas. In California, a giant cement plant in Tehachapi sends far more mercury into the air than any other plant in the state, and it's less than 3,000 feet from Monroe High School. That's less than half the distance between where we are today here in the Capitol and the Washington Monument. Mr. Speaker, nothing is more important to us than our children and our grandchildren. Having spent 20 years as a school nurse, I really don't need any reminders of this, but just 6 months ago, my family was blessed with the birth of a new baby boy. So every time debates about mercury pollution come up, my thoughts immediately go to him and the tens of millions of other children in this country. I know how small and fragile little Oscar is, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to protect him, to make sure the air he breathes and the water he drinks is as safe as it can possibly be. And I'm no different from the millions of mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts and uncles across this country and right in this chamber. We all want the best for our kids, so we must reduce the risks of pollution to them.
Members in the back of the chamber will please remove their conversations from the floor so that the gentlelady can be heard. Gentlelady is recognized.
We all want the best for our kids, so we must reduce the risks of this pollution to them, especially in places that should be safe, like a school. Now, the second part of my simple amendment gives all communities the right to know what pollution is coming from these giant cement factories. Without the sight of ominous clouds billowing from nearby plants, it's easy to assume that we're all relatively safe. But you live right next door to a giant cement plant to suffer the effects of mercury pollution. And I learned this firsthand when I received test results showing that I have an unsafe level of mercury in my body. And I'm not alone, both in the levels of mercury in my system and by the fact that I didn't know about it until I got tested this past summer. Who in this chamber thinks they have a dangerous level of mercury in their system? Probably no one. But who has actually been tested to know for sure? Probably very few of us. So my final amendment just calls for a little transparency. It makes sure that giant cement plants can't hide the truth about the pollution they're dumping into our air each year. It just gives American citizens a right to know what's in their air. That's all. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask that my colleagues consider these two simple propositions. Why should our kids go to schools where mercury is spewing from smokestacks just down the street? And why should any of our constituents be kept in the dark about the pollutants that they're being exposed to? They shouldn't, and we shouldn't stand idly by and let it happen. So today we have the opportunity to speak with one voice. We can vote to protect our children and our grandchildren from mercury and other toxic air pollutants. It's up to us. And so I urge all of us to support this final amendment to the bill, and I yield back.
Generally yields back the balance of her time.